So, we've gone through a lot of what ifs, I understand. We're going to do some more. And the way we're going to do that is by having a panel discussion. Now, when I first saw this, I thought we were going to have a discussion about this beautiful LED panel and how great it is. But instead, we're actually going to say, what if we could have a group of industry experts that understand this space? What if we can get some of their ideas and understand from more broadly how AI and related future technologies are going to impact our ability to design product going forward. So at this point, I'd like to invite our panel up and please welcome them with a round of applause. Welcome, please.
What order?
Please.
I guess we're arbitrary. Oh, there we go.
Really?
Sorry.
Nice to see you.
Please.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Very good. So, welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here. I think we'd like to start with a short round of introductions to make sure that everyone understands who we're talking to here. Martin, please.
Thanks. My name is Martin Eigner. I should do it short, he mentioned, because I'm the eldest one, so typically it takes long. I studied mechanical engineering and economy, got a PhD in applied informatics, worked 5 years for Bosch, technical organization, technical IT. And I founded yesterday, 40 years ago, the first PLM company worldwide, Eigner and partner, and some employees here, Peter, Slavko, John. I think we have a long common history. I became professor on the University of Kaiserslautern. I have had an institute for virtual product engineering and in parallel a consulting company. That's my life.
It is, and Martin and I go back a very long way. Instead of being here for the founding of Aras, I was actually working for this guy, learning the ropes from obviously a very respected industry elder, and we appreciate you having you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Liz.
So it's very humbling to be introducing yourself after Martin. I will just acknowledge that. Liz Graham, CEO of Ada IQ. My career has been basically disrupting legacy ways of operating with new technology platforms across a bunch of different startups, mainly here in the Boston ecosystem. And then prior to that, I had a 13-year career in telecoms, so infinitely curious about how to apply a new technology to industries.
Very good. Welcome. David.
Dave Long. I'm a 35-year systems engineer. I founded a company by the name of Vitech Corporation, which was a systems engineering organization on the early end of model-based systems engineering. Spent 29 years there before exiting. In parallel, I've done a great deal at the international level on the volunteer side. The professional body for systems engineers is known as Incose, International Council on Systems Engineering. Served as a number of leadership roles, including president. Currently serve as their director for strategic integration, which has responsibility for the digital engineering and MBSE portfolio.
Welcome back to ACE. I know you haven't been here in a few years. It's great to have you back and great to have you in the community here.
Thank you.
Julian.
Hi everyone, Julian Ostrow. I'm a senior director at Microsoft in the Microsoft Cloud for Manufacturing space. And while most of my team focuses on building a first-party Microsoft product in manufacturing, I actually exclusively work with ISV partners like Aras. And so if you caught Kevin or Mateo's sessions yesterday, you're starting to see some of the work that we're collaborating on a bit, and there's a lot more to come, a lot of the things that you saw Rob mention in his presentation. I've been in manufacturing and AI in some form or another for close to 10 years now, probably about 8 years now. First focusing on factory floor automation and process control with some of that reinforcement learning that you mentioned and the surrogate modeling. Most recently, of course, it's Gen AI. And so I'm here to provide my perspective on how to hopefully make some of that stuff come true that you mentioned in your last presentation there.
Excellent. And thank you for being here. Thank you for all your help with our AI stuff. This is where we get a lot of our advice is through Julian and his team. We're thrilled to have such a close partner in Microsoft, both as a customer and as a technology partner, to collaboratively push the state of the art forward. So appreciate you being here, it's great to have all you here, and we're going to have an informal discussion, I guess. The way we'd like to start is by asking Dave. You saw all the what-ifs that I proposed. Do you have a what-if of your own? And if so, please share a little bit about it, and then we'll bounce around and see others' reactions to it.
Well, it's hard to follow Rob's what-ifs, but I will take a systems engineering perspective on this. And I like to frame systems engineers as the technical connective tissue that binds together a diverse team as you seek to understand problem and solution. And so that's a very human-to-human problem. It's based on the idea that the collective intelligence of the many is greater than the singular intelligence of the one. I think we can agree to that as believers in the digital thread. But the problem there is then how do you build those linkages? So my what if is what if we could really unlock the latent intelligence that is trapped in all of our existing products in our organization? Now, you may say, hold on, we already do that because we capture the digital thread. And that's true, depending upon our degree of maturity, but we largely capture data on the what. The results of the analysis, maybe some rationale, the endpoint of design. And in the process, we leave so much of the why behind. What is the thinking of each subject matter expert? Not the ultimate rationale for their trade study, but their interests, their concerns, even the equations and constraints that shape their thinking. And all of that why is then the information that today requires human-to-human connection to elicit, because that why is never captured. Now, why could we capture the why today? Well, we heard yesterday about the changes in the UI, the UX, the portals, the connectors, etc. So now, rather than it being a notable upfront investment to ask each contributor to capture their why, yes, it's an additional investment, but it's a minor investment. Once made, we can tag it, we can connect it on the digital thread. I'm sure Julian can tell us how we can take generative and agentic AI for discovery, for synthesis, for tailorability so that we can enable, rather than human-to-human real-time conversation on demand, unlocking our past experiences. What does that do? Well, now instead of our knowledge walking out the door every day at 5 p.m., it truly is a knowledge management system that enables our forward-looking efforts. On the very front end of a project, we can think individually and collectively at the same time, informed by those insights. We won't be as artificially constrained by what we think is the art of the possible. Those past whys will inform the art of the possible, opening up the trade space, accelerating our search, and hopefully leading to better solutions.
Excellent, excellent. So, capturing the why. How do we capture the why? That's the essence of the challenge, I think.
That's the essence of the challenge, but again, I think because the UI, the UX, the connectors, the richness of the data that we can capture now. Yeah. If you ask me to capture my why as an engineer by typing it into a text field, I won't do it. But if you ask me to capture my thinking in a narrative form, in a video form, in a graphic form, we stand a chance.
Understood. Martin, do you have any reaction to the what if?
Yes, I have had two dreams. The first dream, long ago when I worked for Bosch, I was responsible for worldwide change management as a Bosch company for a division. And my dream was very easy. When I changed 4711 revision D, I would got all the impact from over the world. Never. We have had no Teams, no internet. We had phone call, we have fax, and that was a nightmare. And my dream was giving me a tool, I get all the impacts. That was dream number one a long time ago in the 80s. In the 90s, I have to say we were a PDM supplier at that time, and the PDM community thought about what can we do? PDM was a niche, a narrow niche. And then in discussion with some data, with Mark Halpern, Gartner Group, academia, we find a solution, product lifecycle management. Wonderful. Product lifecycle management, you have to think about the semantical meaning of product starting. It's an end-to-end process. It's an interdisciplinary process. And now we are coming very close. I was always laughing when the PLM supplier mentioned they are the single source of truth. It was funny. Never, never. I think now we are able to come very close to the single source of truth. We will never reach the single source of truth, but we are able to come close. And this dream is realized by the digital thread. Digital thread, the digital thread was hijacked from the PLM suppliers too. It looks like digital thread is a term belonging to PDM also. Right now, I think that many speakers yesterday have mentioned it. Digital thread is an overarching approach on top of all the legacy systems along the product lifecycle. And that is what we discussed, product lifecycle management. And we can manage complexity, we can manage traceability, compliance, interdisciplinarity. And my first dream, I can realize I can see the impact if I change something. And a further dream could be, we have tons of data product related, and we can build up on top of the digital thread, we can build up an artificial intelligence strategy. That's my comment. What if?
The more things change, the more they stay the same, it seems.
I think so.
Julian, any impact on AI and how to capture the why that you can share with us?
Absolutely. It's hard to choose which direction to go into first. They're prompted actually by an excellent dinner conversation that I think half of the panel had. UX is often overlooked. And you might be thinking, UX, huh? Where are we going with this? But when you consider how to build trust in these systems and how to get to the point where they're further and further automated, a lot of people are making a lot of top-down statements about what's valuable to a business. How about you try going from the bottom up and actually observing a person at work? So consider this for a moment. Sitting down next to somebody who's an engineer, but they're sitting at a computer for 8+ hours a day. What do? They log into something, maybe they're looking at an email, there's a query, they copy part of that, they open their browser, they go into a PLM system, they enter that into something else, they dig, they pull out something else, they copy that over there. Imagine for a moment if that could have been sped up to the point of Kevin's search presentation yesterday, or even automated. If a human can achieve it and that it's doable, that means we know it's doable. So consider that almost a system in and of itself to be optimized. And you can do that piece by piece, especially if you're doing it in such a bottom-up fashion, that each individual piece is handled in a way that it could be checked, audited, represented to the user in such a way that it builds trust. That might be the big barrier after actually implementing these things, is getting people to use them. I'll admit, Copilot, writing an email for me to my boss, I might not actually be that far yet, right? And everybody's on a different journey. So I think technical implementations, identifications of what people actually need, but then finally that big building trust layer. We're going to have to focus on what individual humans do, at least as much, if not more, than what businesses need.
So if you don't mind, Julian, I'll build on that word trust. Because this requires deep degrees of trust and actually radical transparency if we're going to achieve the degree of collaboration that we want. And I often will say that the transparency is easy because that's what I demand of someone else. What's difficult is vulnerability. And if we're going to put our why out there, then we have to expose ourselves, expose our way of thinking, and actually expose the possibility of being wrong. And that's vulnerability, and that's a different cultural context that we have to build in if we're going to achieve this degree of radical co-engineering and collaboration.
I wonder if we can infer some of the why from the questions that we ask to AI through a conversational interface. It seems that maybe an engineer might be more comfortable in tracking the technical questions they're asking and trying to infer out what they're trying to achieve or how they're trying to achieve something through that. Be interesting. Good. All right, let's move on to the next what if. Liz, what do you got for us?
I'm so excited because a lot of the themes that have already come out are very much at the heart of my what if. So from my standpoint, I wonder what if we could continuously evolve a PLM with real-time information from manufacturing, product performance, and consumer feedback. Because we, and Martin and I were talking, we haven't really actualized pulling that digital thread between the innovation space and the engineering space. And that's what we built Ada IQ to solve, is to look at the fuzzy front end of product development from that creation to prototyping phase and inform it with customer insights, with design for X, whether that's manufacturability or sustainability. And all of this information is now becoming available through the digital thread. So then it becomes, kind of to Julian's point, how do you make this something that people will trust and something people will explore? So some of that is, as I like to say, sort of show your math. Where are you getting this information? Why is it reliable? You're ultimately still going to have humans making decisions about the choices in the design and what they make. And one of the things that's interesting, we're focusing on footwear as our first market application. I was talking to an executive at a global brand that all of you know, half the room probably is wearing right now. And he was saying that every 5 to 7 years, someone comes back with the idea of doing the origami shoe. Like, this is a pervasive, repeated theme. And I think all of us can relate to that, because if you've been at a company for a while, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when we did this. But our systems record what the decisions that were made were, and not kind of to what David was hinting at, which is like, why didn't we do something? And so it then becomes this archivist responsibility for the people who are in the business now to sort of comb through their memory banks and say, why didn't we do that origami shoe back in the day? And so I also think a lot as a operations person at heart about human single points of failure as well as mechanical single points of failure. And this is your knowledge is walking out the door at whatever hour they're signing off. And kind of what you were hinting at, Rob, the ability to transform in an agentic environment the thought process that your experienced product engineers or other experts are going through, and how they make their decisions, the types of queries that they ask of the data and the systems, all of that can now get wrapped together. And then suddenly, when you think about amplifying the information, you now have this really deep, rich ability to validate the decisions that are getting made and really improve the information set that is being brought to bear. So from my standpoint, I'm incredibly excited about the ability of the digital thread to unlock that further upstream value between the innovation and the engineering, and sort of feed back into that innovation loop all the learnings that get captured along the way, and also understand all of the mistakes that were made, so you make a different mistake, or at least avoid making a mistake that you made in the past.
Exactly. If I could, referencing your show your work, show your math kind of statement there, it's one of my favorite topics, is calling back to the effectivity example at the beginning. I see organizations that an engineer might spend a week or a week and a half trying to figure out when a change should be effective, and the answer is April 17th. And we write down April 17th and none of the work that we did in the week to get to April 17th. So how is AI going to learn from April 17th? It's not. It's only going to learn from the process by which we got there. So it's important that we start to record those kinds of things. Julian, do you have a reaction there?
So I love the applied space. I've spent as much time as possible in that, standing on the shoulders of giants in research and learning from people in industry. And that sounds like a data problem to me, fundamentally. Something we discussed is our expectations may have been misset when ChatGPT came out a couple of years ago, because I used that, I played with it, I was amazed. And then I went to work, and I wondered, why can't I do that with this? And I could not, and I still can't to a large extent. And I would argue that one of the primary causes, if not the singular cause of that, is a data issue. So essentially, if you look at the tired old but still very true digital transformation journey as a model, it starts with data collection and it ends with autonomy, right? We've replaced or created some of the best tools possible on the final journey. It doesn't mean you get to skip eating your vegetables or doing your homework and not doing all the work on the first stages. So my hope is not to say that there's nirvana at the end and go back to step one, but rather we can actually apply some of that autonomy, not just for chatbots or conversational interfaces. You used the word fuzzy, which I'm beginning to increasingly use at work. It can do things in the background of data transformation, data contextualization. It can make that first step a lot easier too. So it's actually pulling you, towards those final steps of realizing the predictive and finally the autonomous, the agentic kind of future. So we have some data work to do, but we have a new fun tool to use it.
Well, I wanted to double click a little bit on the concept of consumer sentiment and how that data finds its way back into the digital thread. Any thoughts on how that actually gets recorded and becomes part of our requirements?
I mean, from the types of things that we're doing, we're canvassing what customers are saying, as well as think of your favorite design shop. Getting underneath the implicit needs, not just the explicit needs, and being able to, in our case, we have a deep multimodal design evaluation model that then transfers those components of what customers are saying to very granular attributes of the design, and that information set is all able to be exposed, exported, transported with designs, or archived in a way that then you don't have to be running continual focus groups. And as you get into iterations and further developments, you can go back and test and see what a predicted market reception would be. And I think more and more we're seeing all these micro places where customers are talking about things that they care about or things that they love, or it's in your returns feedback or your RMAs or other places where you're getting information from your customer or your customer's end user. And I think we're just starting to now harness the power of moving that out of categorization or tagging into something that, to Julian's point, is much more conversational.
Yeah. Very cool. So, but in the end, we're not talking about taking every customer's tweets and attaching them to our digital thread, right? We're using some techniques to be able to infer some sentiment from that, use the results of that, and as input to the next design cycle.
Absolutely.
Right? Very good. Very good.
But we should look that we have to integrate the supply chain, because we have to be honest. In my customer base, 50% is done from supplier. So we have to integrate the supplier, we have to integrate the development partner. So it's a real complex. I think we have some obstacles to realize everything. And we have to realize that what is the technology? I think, and how can we embed a large language model? We have just a project. Right now, the customers would like to have the differentiation between potential affected items. That's very easy. Imagine we have realized the graph, that we keep track of the graph, and we can show when I change 4711, this is connected. That's not artificial intelligence, that's keeping track of a graph. But then, now, I would like to see artificial intelligence. What is the real affected item? And we try in a company to do machine learning and to train all over a period of 20 years the change, but the engineering change requests and orders, and shit, they were on paper. Yeah. And that happens. Now we have to digitize. The American have a nice word, we have it in Germany, digitization. That is bringing paper to IT. Now we have to digitize thousands of manual ECRs and ECOs to Excel or some database, and then we can do it. Yeah? So there are some real problems we have to solve, but we can do, I'm quite sure. Yeah.
But the aspect that I love about Liz's what if is it pulls us back into the product space, a problem space, not product space. Because so often as engineering and product development organizations, we focus on the solution. And there's nothing more wasteful than getting the right solution to the wrong problem. Now that we have this opportunity to use data in a different way, to infer, to rapidly iterate in the problem space, we'll make better decisions on day one, and quality just flows from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty alarming stat that 40% of new products fail or underperform when they hit the market, which is just, I mean, mind-blowing. And that really hasn't changed for decades. And I think that now's the time to really, be very critical about what problem are you trying to solve.
I'm surprised it's only 40%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Endless opportunities ahead, it sounds like. And,
I come from Silicon Valley. That's pretty good. And Martin, you make reference to another, a secondary or maybe downstream problem. You have your digital thread, they have their digital thread. What about cross-company or cross-vendor problems? I'm actually seeing the most advancement in that space being done in sustainability reporting, actually, where people have downstream emissions. I think that's what, level 3 of ESG reporting? Scope 3, exactly. And even blockchain is being used very legitimately in cases like that, where I have information about how far that truck drove those parts that you consumed. You need that for your reporting. So interestingly enough, some of that, what happens after they reach the supplier, what about those sentiments? People are, in other contexts, working on ways to find a good way for that kind of to efficiently and securely and compliantly make it back to you to do, what did you call, feature extraction almost in a way of the signals from that raw data.
But we try to solve it. I don't know whether it's valid in the United States. We have two approaches, the administration asset share, maybe you know.
Yep.
So we can concentrate the information from the supplier. We have a QR code, and we can integrate this. We can keep track of the information, we can integrate it. It's administration share and Catena X. That's the way we try it. But the other thing, it's a real mind shift. I think when we talk about all the discipline is not only mechanic, electronic, software. Discipline are the organizational units, sales, concept, design, manufacturing planning. I think about this stupid discussion between EBOM and MBOM. So we need a real mind shift to bring these organizational units and all the disciplines together. And the digital thread we have in mind is a real interdisciplinary approach.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well said.
Sure is. All right, let's move on to Julian. What is your what if big question?
What if prereqs like data issues that we've discussed, even trust issues, security issues that we've discussed, were non-issues? And I don't raise that to paper over them. I would argue that's actually where most of the work might be. It's not literally making the AI models better. They're quite good today. But I ask that not to paper over them, but rather to help us understand what kind of value there is to be unlocked once we do that work. We know that investment in Gen AI is enormous right now, maybe even too much, but it's based on what? How do you actually get through the hype cycle? You have to imagine what the use cases are, and actually, forget imagine, you have to be extremely precise about what the use cases and the business value unlock is, and a lot of that is mired today in yeah, buts, or what ifs to the negative. So let's say that we do solve data issues. The data that you need is available, it's contextualized, it's there. Let's say that it is trustworthy. Then what are we doing? People are talking about this maybe in AGI context or 50 years out. I'm more asking, what are we starting to work on tomorrow? What are we delivering a year or 5 years from now? If we can really articulate that and treat these other issues as just temporary blockers or prereqs, I think investments into AI, not only from hyperscalers like us, but also from providers like Aras or even individual businesses that are the users of our respective products, could be rationalized so much more. And people could get over the impression of it being a hype cycle and call it what it is, right? These are investments that have outcomes that are predictable to some extent, and they're either made and executed successfully or they're not.
Yeah, we
Yes.
see in the community what I've heard feedback is there's a lot of interest amongst the executives and the bean counters of the world. They want AI investment. This is an important future direction for our company, but they don't know what use cases to actually apply it to, and they don't know how to measure the impact and the effect of how we are deploying the AI technology. Any ideas on how we might do that better, Dave?
So for me, it comes back to just a classic systems question, which is every organization needs to understand what their fundamental why is. And we tend to drop into technology, again, we tend to drop into the solution space, but all of us work to deliver some form of business, organization, or societal value. If you don't state what your why is at the organizational level, you don't have a chance of stating what the value of artificial intelligence is, et cetera. Because some of the organizations that we deal with, it's actually all about time to market. Can I get there faster? I'm willing to fail on 10, 20, even 40%, but I have to be there first. Some of them can't afford failure at all.
Right.
Okay, and I think we deal with different services. So is it a time to market? Is it a workforce enablement? Is it a quality? What are you after? And until each organization decides, not these are the 15 things that we're after, not these are the 5, but this is the real one, no nonsense, maybe a secondary that we're after, then we can identify the use cases, the measures, et cetera, with it.
Any thoughts on how we might achieve getting down to 1 or 2? I think that's the tough part.
It's case by case, it's business by business, but these are optimization goals, right?
Yeah.
And I would argue that businesses probably have those already, and they're trying to employ AI to reach them. So at the same point that you go back to time to market decisions, everything else, right? Executives need to make careful choices about where they spend their time and energy, even which other corporations they align themselves with, right? I have to acknowledge we're competing with other hyperscalers, with research firms, with everything else. Outside of moonshots, which one could argue, you know, the sort of investment going to this being treated sort of like that, it's not this kind of success or breakthrough at all costs mentality. It's still a business trade-off. People are still beholden to shareholders. So the optimization goals are probably in mind to some extent, but a careful auditing of those against current capabilities. Everything is cost benefit at the end of the day, right? I've done a lot of consulting in the past, and so you can adjust a cost benefit sentence, and that's either a contract getting signed or me getting kicked out of a room or anything in between, right? So looking at it coldly in those terms before you invest or before you decide to switch or before you decide to automate, don't get caught up in the hype. Verify and hold, you know, the providers like ourselves to account.
Yeah.
We have the stats and we can provide those.
Okay. Can I
Of course.
jump in on one thing? Because I think, you know, certainly the companies that I talk to, there's a lot of anxiety around AI taking my job and,
Sure.
you know, the change management. And I think, to Dave's point, when you get very clear on the why, then, you know, then the change management becomes much easier because people are looking past the technology to the outcomes and to what's driving the business, and you can get over some of that agita and antibody resistance to bringing in a new technology because people really are inspired by where, you know, where you're going and achieving that direction.
100. But that story I told of observing somebody reading the email and copying and pasting, I'd love to get people out of the business of spending their time in the mundane. And I hesitate to call, you know, some of the engineering pursuits creativity or art, but in a way they are. Let's free ourselves up from the mundane. once we do the homework and actually get ourselves to the point where the agents are trustworthy and capable enough to handle that for us. But I'd love us focusing on things that the technology can't catch up to, or I would even argue shouldn't be catching up to. Call that art, call that creativity, call it engineering. At a certain point, I don't see a strong distinction actually between the two.
I absolutely agree. I think engineers are creative beings by nature,
Yep.
and want to do more creative things and fewer mundane things.
Yep.
I'm quite sure. So good. All right. Last but not least, Martin, do you have a big what-if question that you want to pose to the community here?
I know, I would like to put the question to the community because it looks very nice when we have digital thread, but we have to be aware. When we are not able to make the connection in the legacy systems, we are not able to do an automatic approach to connect these different graphs from the legacy system into a common graph. So my recommendation is when we start with the digital threads, the first preparation, it sounds stupid. It goes to a numbering. You know, this discussion great later is that ERP and PLM has the same numbering system, the documents and the material master, number one. So then the first step, and we have some customers doing this approach, bringing together PLM and ERP in Germany, SAP. And based on the number, we have an automatic process, the PLM graph and the ERP graph is merged on the digital thread level. Very easy. But now think about requirements coming from Codebeamer. Requirements are not connected. How are we able to connect the requirements to the rest of the world? Oh, I hope Incose, we can convince the customers we can build up a system architecture. Okay, we took the requirements, the function, logic, and behavior, and then shit, we have the logical elements and how the logical elements are connected with the bill of material. So I think integration is a very hard approach, and we as companies, we must be prepared to build up a digital thread. I think that is my comment. Yeah.
I would tend to agree, since that's what we do here, is build digital threads. But let me maybe ask Julian, is it important for the part number to be the same in PLM and ERP, or can AI just fix that problem for us?
Maybe not just fix, but I'm going to use that fuzzy word again. And maybe I'm going to introduce another word that David and I were discussing, which is translation. And we're going to use that in a variety of contexts. I'd love to hear from you after I answer that. As long as something can understand that that is that, or that is a portion of that, or that approximates that, or that is the best match of that, or right? Whatever the query or request is, whatever kind of fuzziness in the matching or translation is acceptable, right, for the task at hand. Not necessarily, and I wouldn't like that to be the case, because I think older school data mapping and digital thread building and whatnot relies on matching. This equals that. Yep. We know the real world, which is what this all interfaces with eventually, right? Typically, at least. We know it's messy. One of my favorite parts of some of the more modern AI capabilities is that they are messy too. They are fuzzy. They're comfortable with messy. As long as we can sort of wrangle that properly, let's take advantage of that. It's a perfect example of what I was saying, is using some of that technology that people associate with the last step of the digital transformation journey actually get you through the first step.
So is there a process by which that fuzziness reduces, or does it remain? Right? So if we have different part numbers in ERP and PLM, is the result of the AI analysis that we have a way to translate back and forth, or is the result that we'll just check it, we'll just do the same math next time?
Yep, I'm going to give you an overly technical answer.
Okay, please.
If you're optimizing for disk space, no. If you're optimizing for speed of execution the next time someone asks the same question, yes, cache it. Basically, cache the fact that, that was that, good enough a month ago, so don't re-query the entire database, we have the answer to it. Up-leveling that a little bit though, question is, what are you optimizing for?
Right, right.
Yep.
To me, I optimize for the right answer, so I would tend to write down. I mean, I've seen examples of generative AI. You ask, what are the 5 most important features of this product?
Yep.
And I get an answer. And then I ask a different chatbot the same question, I get a different answer. Well, if I have different models, different LLMs every day, and I get a different answer, how is my customer ever going to understand what are the actual 5 most important things?
Yep.
And I think it's important that we get to a point where we're writing that kind of stuff down instead
That's
of
caching
relying.
too.
Yeah, it's caching, but I hope it's also caching in PLM where it belongs.
For me, there is a risk here on the AI wave that honestly we get a little lazy, and I think that's some of what we're talking about here. That AI is inherently probabilistic. It's great for making inferences. It's great for adding insights. We can use it to clean up data. We can use it to suggest links. But when, as engineers or practitioners, we know A is B, or A derives from B, or whatever semantic linkage should exist, well, either we should put it in at the front end, or once it's suggested, we should add it back in. And then in terms of the translation aspect, for me, that's actually where some of the high value add and very interesting aspects are, because as we try to connect this disparate data, one of the challenges is that each discipline has digitized. And we've digitized around our own concerns, our own concepts, and our own language. And my language is different than your language, is different than your language. And worst of all, they're not separate, they're overlapping. So we'll use words that have slightly different meanings. The example I'll always use is, if you're bored one day, take a software engineer, an electrical engineer, and a systems engineer and use the word function. Okay? Because they're 95 to 98% the same. They're 2 to 5% different. Now, that's a case where AI can actually help me translate and communicate between those bodies of knowledge around a piece of product, etc. That's a translation function that I think inference and translation can help us with.
Agreed. Well, we are getting towards the end of our time. I wanted to give everybody an opportunity for some final thoughts. Maybe we can start with Martin.
Yeah, I have one topic. We have a lot of discussion in LinkedIn, so with Oleg, with you, with Rob Verona. And there was a question, hey, is this a new legacy system? Besides all the other legacy systems. And my answer is yes, it could be a different, thin legacy system, the digital thread. But my real opinion is that the PLM provider with the right technology, and that does mean low-code engine, repository technology, federated data. And I think a modern PLM system based on a modern software technology is able to come out of this narrow niche of PDM and build up this overarching umbrella. That is my comment.
You have a name for that overarching?
Do you know the system, Rob?
I think maybe I've heard of it before.
Okay.
Okay, good. I mean, I've heard and I've seen you write a lot about this idea of digital thread as a service, and I think that's pertinent to what you're describing here. And yes, of course, I believe that is an important part of the future here, and hopefully enabled by the technologies we're discussing today. Liz, anything to add?
I'm just excited because the future's here. I mean, we are able to actually achieve a lot of these ideas and unlock human creativity and make these systems more responsible and available and helpful in a way that we want to relate to them, instead of in designing our query to respond to the way the system wants to be talked to. And I think that that's transformative. It also really frees up the ability to onboard people in using systems much, much faster, because they don't have to have the same degree of technical expertise. And I think that democratizes a lot of information across industries, which I think just fundamentally, kind of to what Dave was saying, sort of creates more powerful linkages when you have that shared why.
Very good. Very good.
So I think you said it very well, Liz. The future is here. What an exciting time between the computational capabilities, the recognition of the value and availability of data, what AI, what digital thread, what all these technologies do. So the first thing that I would say, Rob, the what if question that you open this with is such a powerful one. If we're going to move forward with computing taking care of the perspiration, now the human is free for the inspiration. And so whatever our role is at the technical level, at the organizational level, at the societal level, we have to maintain that level, that mindset of what if. What could we do? That sense of wonder. The other thing that I will say is, and we have to recognize that different people will always be at different points in the journey. And they have different levels of comfort with change. This is a very scary time for many of the people in our organizations. Is AI going to replace me? How can I live in this new world? Can I keep pace? And so we as leaders have to figure out how can we bring people along in this fundamental new journey.
Very good. Julian.
First of all, I have to say what an honor. Rob, Martin, Liz, David, spending time with you this week has been a real privilege for me and the ACE community. I really love what Aras is doing in this business and how this business runs. Microsoft are users of Aras. And so number one, thank you for that, everybody, just for the time and listening to some of us fuddy-duddies up here. I want to leave the group with a call to action of sorts. We actually have more control over whether this all ends up as a hype cycle thing or not, and how useful it is or is not to you. And I would say that actually starts with you giving your feedback, and that's to your peers, to your management, to the vendors of these tools and products that you're making. Even clicking the little thumbs up or thumbs down actually has a greater impact than you think. Let me explain why I say that and kind of put that call to action in context. Business decisions are going to be made about AI investments, right? And business decisions are going to be made based on people purchasing things, efficiency goals being made. I'm convinced that the technology is there or close to there. I'm actually convinced that some of the greatest gaps are going to be user adoption. And user adoption problems are rooted in trust or efficacy problems, right? So often, people will abandon or just move on. They try, next. Take that extra second if you can to make your voice heard, because I promise the people that make these things are listening. There's billions of dollars literally behind those decisions, but it all starts with your collective input and feedback. Help us make these things great for you, and I promise that we will listen. Thank you.
Very well put. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, all panelists. We very much appreciate your time and your insights.